Though they are pretty much the norm in the motorsports world, inverted forks are still pretty unusual in mountain biking, but I would say that is changing today with the release of the Fox Podium. This is the brand's first foray into a production inverted fork and is pretty much the first inverted single crown fork from a major manufacturer. It's targeting big enduro bikes and e-bikes alike, and it offers some pretty interesting performance gains over your typical let's say, non-inverted fork option. Now, in order to walk you through what makes the Podium tick, I'm gonna take you on a little ride, strap you to my chest, and talk through the tech, the features, and who this fork is supposed to be for, as well as some ride impressions. All right, I'm at the top of the trail to run you through the Podium. Start with the tech, some of the static things here. We've got fart buttons on top of the fork, damper side and air. Damper is adjusted, same as the other Grip X2 dampers. Air side is a little different because the valve is located on the bottom of the fork, but otherwise you air it up as normal. And that's about it in terms of the static facts. It's got the rebound knobs on the bottom, as you're used to, and otherwise you just use it as a fork. So I'm gonna do that. I don't actually think I've ridden this trail, so we'll see how well I can spit tech facts and interpret a new trail to me. So, starting with the travel numbers on the Podium, it comes in 160 and 170 only. And if you're buying it aftermarket, you will only be able to buy it in the factory trim. There is a 150 option, but that's OE only, as is the Performance Elite, OE only. Other important tech facts. We've got the Grip X2 damper that we are used to. Oh, that's a little funky. But it is tuned specifically for the Podium, and that means it's a heavier damper tune because the fork has inherently a lot less friction than something like a 36 or a 38. Due to its inverted design and some of the other little details they've snuck into it. So heavier damper tune, but same sort of adjustment that we're used to. And wow, this is already so dry. It rained this morning. You will not immediately have the option to choose different damper tunes, but according to Fox, they will have aftermarket options for people who want to change how their fork is tuned. The Podium is probably the stiffest single crown fork I've ever ridden. And even compared to the 38, is pretty substantial. Most of that is thanks to the super beefy uppers and the amount of bushing overlap they've been able to package into this thing, which is just how much it's bracing itself as you move through travel. It's got more bushing overlap than even the 40, but I wouldn't say that's like a key metric that you're noticing on trail. You're just like, wow, this is stiff. So the axle to crown heights of the Podium, oh, I'm bleeding, are about the same as the 38. So I wouldn't worry too much about fitment in that sense. One thing that is a lot different than the 38 is the weight. The Podium packs about 500 grams more than the 38, though a lot of that is, let's say, uppers weight. They've done a lot to reduce the sprung mass of the fork thanks to the inverted design, but it's still very heavy. So I would say this is like, it's gonna be a lot of e-bikes, a lot of super heavy enduro bikes where this makes sense. And I would caution you from putting it on like an otherwise light trail bike just because of the like weight disparity that'll come up there. Wow, incredible. I love mountain biking so much. I've been riding it for a couple months now on my frameworks and have been nothing short of impressed, honestly. It has, I would say, like a sensitivity that is kind of unlike anything I've ridden. In contrast to the 38, I would say, ooh, watching the speed here. The Podium is maybe riding on the damper a little more, which is to say, in order to get more support out of it, I would err on closing out the compression rather than trying to get it all out of the spring. The air spring is supportive enough. It's just that in order to get it to like kind of plow through stuff, I've preferred it a little softer in the spring and firmer on the compression. All right, one quick aside on the adjustments of the Podium. How do you adjust the air pressure? Traditionally, it's right here at the top of the fork, but on the Podium, it is a bit different. It's down here at the bottom. Now you can do this without flipping the bike, but I've found it way easier to do it with the bike upside down. And one of the main reasons for that is that you don't accidentally let any oil out of the bottom of the fork. So, as per usual, you get your shock pump, you hook it up, adjust air pressure, flip it back over, easy peasy. And so you can see, it kind of wants to squirt oil out on you. So do be cautious when you're removing the shock pump. Don't get oil on your brake. It's kind of a minor annoyance with this fork design, but like if you do it carefully, it'll be fine. Like Fox's other new fork releases this year, the 34 and the 36, the Podium uses a standard cassette wrench in order to change the volume spacers. So same deal, release air pressure, use your little spline tool to pull this cap off and then change your spacers. The volume spacers in the Podium are a bit different than the typical 38 or 36 spacer, and they're kind of a half size, so you can more finely adjust volume. Additionally, they only fit this fork, so you will get spacers for this fork when you get the fork. I now want to touch on a quick comparison of the Podium versus the Fox 38, because I think that's going to be the most logical either or that people are shopping for when they're looking at the Podium as an option. So, first and foremost, the obvious details. The Podium only comes in 170 and 160 mil travel, where the 38 goes from 150 up to 180. The Podium, well, it's upside down, and the 38 is not. But I don't think that that is a tremendously important detail when comparing the two. The comparison comes down more to how they perform on trail. Both feature the same Grip X2 damper, assuming you bought a 38 with that damper. And I think it provides a similar feel in terms of how the fork handles bumps and maintains ride height through compressions. But I would say that the Podium is a bit more reliant on the damper in order to maintain that ride height. So you're going to be using more of the compression in order to like keep the thing settled. And I think that's a nice detail. Like I actually enjoy that and find that it allows you to maybe maintain more grip through certain circumstances, where I feel like the 38, though it is like incredibly composed and comfortable, you're getting some of that support via, call it the air spring, call it friction. The 38 feels like it requires a little less damping in order to maintain a similar ride feel. Touching on some of the details that aren't quite as critical to the riding performance, I think there are some things worth highlighting. The 38 is, I would say, generally easier to live with. It has a typical brake mount, as you'd expect, a 15 mil axle that will work with all existing trail bike wheel sets, and the cable routing is normal, where the Podium requires, I'd say, a little bit more attention in terms of how you route the hose for the front brake, and also in terms of how you air it up and all the little things there. Just touching on those, you know, the brake mount, 200 mil native is easy. It's great, actually. You don't have to use an adapter. The air valve being on the bottom is, I'd say, a little more annoying to work on than a 38, but it's not a deal breaker by any means. The hose routing going up through these guides requires, you know, a bit of faff to get it set where it doesn't make any noise or rub anywhere. And when compared to the like one clamp on the 38, it's just inherently more complicated. But when it comes to like riding the bike, once you have it set up, it works great and is quiet. I'd say the one detail that people would expect to hear a big difference on is torsional stiffness between the two. And that's where I really don't find a tremendous difference. The Podium is distinctly stiffer for aft, like in the bending type loads, but the 38 doesn't feel like it's much stiffer torsionally. Like maybe you could have some sort of placebo type experience there, but realistically it's not drastically different. We even tried to shoot like a side-by-side of the same section of trail and you can't really see much of a difference either, so I wouldn't say it's something worth worrying about. One other concern that I think people might bring up is damage to the stanchions. You know, the guards do a very good job. I've had them contact some things, but nothing has transferred to the stanchions themselves. They look healthy and happy. And I would say that in comparison to the 38, it's similarly durable in that sense. The one upside is that because the seals face down, they don't seem to get quite as dirty as a regular upright fork. So I find that I'm cleaning them less, which is kind of a nice detail, but I think they're both excellent. I'm not gonna say that I have an outright favorite between the two, but the Podium certainly performs better downhill. It has a level of grip and compliance to it that is, it is more than the 38. That said, do not take that as me saying the 38 is not still an excellent fork. Touching on the pros and cons of the Podium, the first pro that comes to mind for me is how well it rides. It is a distinctly impressive fork. Like, there are a lot of good forks right now. I think this is offering a ride feel that is maybe a cut above when it comes to single crown forks. The like composure, grip, and support you can get out of this thing when you set it up nicely is really impressive. That said, there are some excellent alternatives out there, so it's not like it's the only good fork now, but it is a very, very good option. Another pro is how easy to live with it is, despite being this kind of exotic thing. I think beyond the necessity of a downhill wheel, it's pretty much a normal experience. Like, yes, the cable routing for the front brake is a little more complicated, but beyond that, it's just like a normal fork. And you tune it how you tune a 38, and then you go for a ride, and it's great. The cons are, I think, pretty obvious. One is it's really heavy. It's, you know, it's pushing half a kilo over a 38, which is already a heavy fork. So this is gonna be for specific builds only in my mind, like e-bikes of a certain sort, enduro bikes that are already heavy and are going to be pushed as hard as you possibly can. And we will see, I think, some like unusual trail bike spec because they have a 150 OE version of this fork, but I think that's a pretty unusual edge case, so I'll be curious to see if that ever crops up. But yeah, it's heavy. I would not say this is a fork for all people on all bikes in that sense. The other obvious con is the cost. This thing is $2,000 US, and you can only buy it in the factory edition. Similar to the 40, this is like an elite, high-end, super baller product, and so that $2,000 price tag reflects that. Personally, I would buy a 38 because it's about half the price, and I'd spend $1,000 on, I don't know, pastries or something. It's a lot of money. Like, you could buy a bike for $2,000, or you could buy possibly the best single crown fork I've ridden. So, answering that question we opened with, is it worth it? For a lot of people, I think the answer is no. But if you do want the best single crown fork experience in 160 or 170 millimeters of travel, this is probably it. It's really good. So that's all for now. Head over to the Pinkbike article for all of my nitty-gritty thoughts and for more photos and tech info on the Podium. And be sure to subscribe because we have a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipe. There's always more. See you soon.